without further ado, give John a round of applause.
I do think it's kind of funny. I searched my name the other day on Google just to prove to somebody that there weren't any other John Nelsons around that were developers, and lo and behold, there's a John Nelson at Squid, so that's kind of funny. All right, so moving on. All right, so modern Salesforce development workflow with Visual Studio Code, why you should use Visual Studio Code for your current and next Salesforce project. So this is a safe harbor slide. This is kind of Salesforce boilerplate about, don't make any assumptions about what the future holds based on the talk today, just because, it's their legalese kind of stuff. They don't want to get in trouble. So, thank you. Thank you for coming. My name is John Nelson. I work at CodeScience. I'm a code scientist. Here's a little bit of a blurb about CodeScience, founded in 2008. 60 employees. We do a lot of work on the Salesforce platform. We have a whole bunch of apps on the App Exchange, and we are hiring. So, a bit about Salesforce. So, Salesforce was created in 1999 It was kind of the original software as a service application. It started out mostly as a CRM platform for salespeople. They kind of expanded out into their service cloud and to service companies, so like call centers and things like that. Since then, they've kind of expanded out their infrastructure underneath. So they have database.com, force.com, and they have an entire platform now that you can take and build applications on. They were the originator of this term App Store. In fact, there's a kind of a topical story about Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, going to Steve Jobs one day for his birthday and giving him the right to call his App Store the App Store. Other great things about Salesforce is that they are a big company, so if you don't know about them, you do need to know about them. By the way, who here is actually a Salesforce developer? Like, who does work on the Salesforce? All right, great, so about a third of you, great. So other reasons why Salesforce matters, why you should care about it. Well, the great reasons why businesses care about it is that there's no software to install. That's their big thing. They have their sassy logo. The little no software symbol. Their kind of selling point is that you don't have to have an IT team to install all your software for you and manage the desktops and manage the infrastructure. You don't have to worry about hiring a DBA to take and manage the database and manage the servers and all that stuff. All that stuff's taken care of for you by Salesforce. It's all in the cloud. It's all safe. Another big selling point about Salesforce is that they are compliant with pretty much every single governmental regulation out there. So if you have any business with healthcare companies, well, they are HIPAA compliant. If you have other jobs with employment agencies, they're compliant with those regulations too. They build themselves as the top CRM for sales and service people, and they're the fastest growing App Exchange marketplace on the internet. So now that I've told you a little bit about Salesforce and why you might be interested in it, let's talk about the reason why we're here today. Why am I talking about a modern JavaScript development? Well, typically when I started with a company, you learn about JavaScript and there's a whole bunch of issues with it. The guy that sits next to me uses Linux, the guy to my right uses Windows, and the guy across from me uses OS X. And there aren't very many applications or editors or development environments that you can use on all the different platforms. And we all love the modern web. We all love HTML5 and JavaScript and CSS. And since we love the modern web, since we kind of want to push the modern web forward and see where it takes us, we naturally love AngularJS. AngularJS is an awesome front-end library that you've probably heard about, probably know all about, and it's great. But with Angular 2 moving to TypeScript, where does that really leave us? Where's that kind of, how do we make sure that we can integrate all these new tools, all these new technologies with our workflow and actually push up applications to Salesforce? It's kind of a strange thing that a lot of people don't really spend a lot of time looking at or can figure out. So enter Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code was introduced by Microsoft on April 30th of this year at their Build conference. It's actually at version 0.80. That was released yesterday. So they are on a regular development cycle of a month. They are coming out with new features, new things all the time. Every single month there's new things. So kind of a little blurb about Visual Studio Code is that it offers a new choice of a tool that combines the simplicity of a code editor with what we need as developers using a modern workflow. It's built on an open source stack. So kind of the underpinnings of Visual Studio Code is the Atom runtime, or what used to be called the Atom shell, what they changed into the Electron shell. And that's built on Node.js underneath. And Electron is kind of the marriage between Node.js and Chromium, so it gives you the ability to write web applications, but deploy them natively for platforms from any type of different platform that runs Node, and Node runs on pretty much any different platform. So there's a big, awesome ability to run this code on lots of different platforms. So what does Microsoft bring to this whole stack? What's their benefit, or what's the benefit of why do we care about Visual Studio? Well, they use their Monaco editor on top. The Monaco editor is the same editor that they use in their Visual Studio Online product. So it's a fairly mature text editor now. The magic underneath that gives you the cool goodies is that they use the OmniSharp Roslyn project to provide Intellisense, and the TypeScript compiler to give Intellisense for JavaScript. So there aren't very many editors out there where you can get actual Intellisense for JavaScript. I'm not talking about just code completions, but actual real method signatures. You can take and create type definition files for the JavaScript files that you already have. You don't need to convert it into TypeScript, and you can get actual method signatures for your JavaScript, something that's kind of unheard of. It's kind of amazing when you can go into a page, type in Angular, press dot, and there you have every single different function or method that Angular can call. So it's really great for discoverability. It's really great for writing code because you have Intellisense with your JavaScript. It's pretty awesome. So now that I've kind of sold you on why you need to care about Salesforce and kind of described to you a little bit about Visual Studio Code, let's talk a bit about where it lies on the spectrum of editor versus IDE. So can I get a poll? Who here uses a more editor-centric tool to use in your workflow? So a few of you. How many people use an IDE? A lot more of you. So, all right. So this talk is kind of more about where Visual Studio lies on that continuum. On the left-hand side, we have something like a text editor, such as Notepad. Sublime Text kind of falls a little bit farther on that spectrum. Now, on the right-hand side, you have tools like Eclipse and Visual Studio. So what is a text editor? Let's kind of define what that is. Well, the way you work with a text editor is that a text editor is normally light and fast. It's a application that opens up really quickly. Notepad opens up very fast. Visual Studio Code opens up in 2 seconds or less. Since you're working with a plain editor, a lot of times your organization is just going to be basic files and folder structures. You're not going to have a solution file or anything like that. And people work in lots of different languages with Notepad. And the real big thing with an editor is that it's keyboard centric. So editors like Sublime Text and Atom and Brackets, things like that, they're very keyboard centric. And Vim, especially Vim. Vim is kind of the classic text editor. So on the right-hand side, we have an IDE. So in IDEs, like Eclipse or Visual Studio, there are tons of buttons, tons of menus. There's kind of a story where Scott Guthrie challenged the people on his Visual Studio team to name all of the buttons on the tab strip at the top of the standard tab strip. None of their developers could actually name all the tabs, name all the buttons. So it kind of goes to show that a lot of times in editors you get kind of feature overload. So one of the reasons why we like editors is because they're very slim down to only what we need. Other things that you get with IDEs is you get code understanding. Like Visual Studio has Intellisense built into it. So whenever you're writing C# code, you can do control space to autocomplete something, or control shift space to get a method signature, things like that. There are file new wizards, so you can go up to File, New, and open up a new project, create a new solution. There are design surfaces, so you can take and create a schema based on with a designer and stuff like that. And there are awesome build tools, like with Visual Studio, there's Play to Debug, famous thing. So you just open up a project, press play, it's awesome. Great stuff, great stuff. But a lot of times it's a little bit of overload. So where does Visual Studio Code lie on this spectrum? Kind of lies right about there. It's more of a code editor. It's mostly a code editor, but it does have some IDE-ish features. And I think it has the right IDE-ish features. Not too many features, just the right ones. So it is text editor based, and the organization is very simple, but there is a project context. So you do get a project folder that you can put individual project settings into that describe how you want your JavaScript to be compiled, how you want it to be linted, and things like that. The other great things that it has is it has the ability to run tasks. So there's a task runner built into it. You can play to debug. So if you have a Node.js application, you can take and open up that Node.js application. You can go into the debugger, press play, and it'll take and run your Express app, your Node app. And you can actually debug JavaScript applications inside of the editor. I mean, there aren't that many editors where you get a built-in Node debugger. I mean, there's WebStorm, there's a couple other ones, but the field is very limited. Other great thing that it has built into it is it has great Git integration. It's kind of funny that Atom is the GitHub editor, but I actually like the Git integration with Visual Studio a lot better. And you do get Intellisense, like I was talking about, where you get actual real method signatures for your JavaScript files. So now that I've kind of sold you on Visual Studio Code, why you should care about it, why it matters, it's still in beta, right? So it's not really made for Visual Studio or not really made for Salesforce yet. So because of the magic of it being built with Atom, being built on a whole bunch of open source technologies, we were able to take and harness that previous open source work and take and bring in things like syntaxes and snippets. Syntax gives us nice highlighting. So here we have nice blue method signature, a method name is teal, the return statement's purple, and the comments are green. So you can get a good context just by looking at it about what you're actually, the structure of your code. You can see visually without having to, sort through every single different character or method that you're calling. On the right-hand side, we have snippets. So snippets, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. They're pretty cool little auto-completion things where you can type in something like CLA, press Control Space, and you can take and create a little class method signature there. And it does have tab completion, so once you do create your class, you can tab to get into the name, type in hello world, tab to go to the next thing, and just start writing your code. So great features to allow us to actually edit those Salesforce files with Visual Studio Code. So that's kind of the baseline. The baseline is that we can actually open up the files, edit them, do something with it. After we get there, that kind of leads into other tools. The foundation is that we need to edit it, but we're talking about a workflow. You're here to hear about a workflow. What is this modern workflow that we're talking about, and how does it fit into Visual Studio Code with Salesforce and that whole thing? How do you get from 0 to Salesforce? Well, the first thing you just do to start off with is a lot of times with projects there's boilerplate code. You don't want to start off with a completely blank slate because there's a lot of code that you write in projects typically that is just standard stuff. Configuration files, things like that take and help you start with a good start, start with a good beginning for your project, so you can have good practices, good things built into it. So we use tools like generators, code generators. We use tools like Yeoman and Slush. Yeoman is a very popular tool. Slush is getting more popular. Slush is kind of cool because it's really just a gulp file. I'll talk more about gulp in a second. So now that you have your project scaffolded out, you need to actually put something in there. You need to actually, a lot of times the stuff that we build, we have to include other projects into it. We have to include other plugins. So we use package managers like NPM and Bower. And these package managers help us install plugins, help us manage our dependencies properly in our package so that everything installs great, easily. You can open up a command line, do npm install, give it a name of what package you want to install, and bam, it's there in your project. Not a whole bunch of work after that. So now that you have all of your code kind of in there, that you have to use best practices to do things like minify it, uglify it, and bundle it, and optimize your CSS, and concatenate all your files together. So you have to have a build process. We use build tools like Gulp and Webpack. And these build tools help us automate the process of taking a regular old just plain JavaScript files or TypeScript files or CoffeeScript files, whatever kind of files you want, and taking and bundling them up into a single JavaScript file that can be deployed up to the server. So you don't have a tremendous amount of junk cluttering your page or tremendous amount of script calls cluttering your JavaScript files. You just have the one file, the one bundle.js file that holds all your JavaScript, holds all your CSS, holds all of even your images inside of there. So now that you have all the code kind of in your project, you have it built, we need to actually put it up to the server. So we use tools like Heroku for us and JS Force. JS Force is an awesome Node.js library. It's open source, and it allows, it's built with Node, so if you were to use JS Force, you can use Node throughout the entire project. Heroku Force is a Go project, and a kind of funny side note is that Heroku is actually owned by Salesforce. I don't know if a lot of you have heard about Heroku, but Heroku's kind of, that new platform for the web that everybody's been talking about. You can take and deploy code from the command line with a simple publish command. So where does Visual Studio Code lie with this whole continuum? Here's the workflow, here's how you get stuff done. What does Visual Studio Code add to this mix? It's editor, but it has a task runner built into it. So that's really how it integrates with this whole workflow. It's really the magical kind of linchpin that kind of pulls this whole thing together, is that you can use a task runner such as gulp or grunt. It also supports Jake files. So Visual Studio Code supports these files natively. You don't have to do anything. If you just have them in your project root, it will see the task names. You can take and open up your task runner and type in the first few characters of whatever task you want to run, press enter, and bam, you can take and run your task. It's great stuff. You can do pretty much anything with the task runner because it's built with Node. It's built with command line tools. So you can take and do anything you can with a command line tool or with Node with a task runner. So you can pretty much use the task runner ability to integrate with whatever tool you want to integrate with. So that kind of gets us from empty project and editing the code all the way up into Salesforce. We don't work in a silo. A lot of times we work on teams. So how do we get that code that somebody else has edited on the server and bring it down to our, our local development environment? Well, we use a tool called Ant. Ant is a great tool that is built with Java, and it integrates fantastically with our continuous integration tools like Circle CI and Cumulus CI, and it helps us to take and retrieve the code in one big, command off the Salesforce server and back into our local development environment. And by the way, you can use Ant to do your retrieval and deployment. You can also use Heroku and JS Force to do both deployment and retrieval. But we like this kind of pattern because it simplifies the way we retrieve things and it's easier to deploy stuff. So now that we've kind of closed that loop on the development cycle, we actually have to get that code and keep it safe. We don't want to lose our work. What happens if our computer goes down? Well, we need to version that code and put it somewhere safe, so we use Git. You can use any type of Git repository, be it GitHub or Bitbucket or even your own private Git server. And you can take and integrate Visual Studio Code great with that. Like I mentioned earlier, it has great Git integration. So one of the cool things that I really like about Visual Studio Code's Git integration is that you get a two-up view. So by simply clicking a button in the code that you're looking at, you can see the code as it was at your last commit, and the code where it is now has nice red-green highlighting for the lines that changed. And you can take and revert the changes from the editor, commit the changes, and even push them up to the server straight from the editor. It's pretty fantastic. The Git integration with Visual Studio Code is excellent. I really only ever need to drop into the command line when I need to do things like rebasing or creating a new checkout or force pushing something up to the server. So this is kind of the workflow. There's a lot of tools here. It's kind of icon logo overload, it seems like. But really, this is kind of the way the modern workflow works. With the modern workflow, we have a lot of different tools that do one thing well, and we kind of find a way to cobble them all together into one big process that works end to end. And everybody kind of has different favorite tools. A good example of that is Grunt versus Gulp. Grunt is configuration based, where you take and create a JSON configuration, and that determines how your project's built. Gulp is deemed the streaming build server, where you take objects and you transform them through streams, and it works the same way with promises. You just take and chain things together, and you pass the object from one function into the other function. And so two different kind of philosophies, ways of doing it, and that's what this is all about, is that you can choose the tool that you want to use, choose the technologies that work best for your workflow and best for your personality, put them together in a big coherent package. And on this page, Gulp is the real winner here, in that we can use it for our build process. We can even use it with Gulp and JS Force to deploy our stuff. We can use it with the task runner. We can even use it to retrieve if you want to. And Slush is actually just Gulp. with a gulp interrogator built into it. So you can take and ask questions and respond to those questions inside of your gulp file. So it might seem like a whole lot of icons, but it really isn't that many technologies when you kind of get into it and you work with it, especially if you use gulp, because it can be used for so many different things. So the real linchpin on this, like I was talking about, is the task runner. So let's talk a little bit more about running tasks with Visual Studio Code. The way you define tasks with Visual Studio Code is you have a task.json file. And that task.json file is what we can see here on the left. And here, right here, you define what command you want to build. So be it any kind of command line tool, anything you want to run, you can take and run it from there. We had originally used the force command line tool and just taken and used the task.json file as a wrapper around force. So we put force there instead of gulp. So whenever we ran a task, it would just be force and whatever the command task we wanted to do was. The real cool thing about task.json, though, is that it does give us things like variables. So this represents the file that we're working with. So a really cool thing that I use in my workflow is typically with something like Maven's Mate or Eclipse, whenever you save a file, it watches those files and it'll automatically take and bundle it or take and compile that and push it up to the server. So you can get that real-time feedback between saving something and pushing it up. I'm not a real big fan of that automatic saving thing. Sometimes I make a change. Sometimes I don't want it to actually be pushed up to the server. So I take and push my files manually. So sometimes I can push my files manually. So if I'm in a class file and I want to take and push it up to Salesforce, I just take and open up my task runner, Command Option P, and type in push, and it'll take and push my file up to Salesforce. Another cool thing that we see over here on the right-hand side, this is our gulp file that we took and wrapped with this JSON file. And here we can see some tasks that I defined. So here at the top, we have my Webpack task. We use Webpack to do the bundling of the project that I'm on right now. So with this task, it takes and kicks off a watcher that'll watch all the JavaScript, all the HTML, all the Sass, LESS files, all the front-end assets that I have, and take and optimize them up into a package. And with this Webpack deploy project, we get real-time, pretty much real-time, save a JavaScript file, it'll bundle it up, push it up to the server automatically, so you never have to worry about taking in automatically running the build process on your JavaScript files on your front-end project. You can just let the watcher do it. So down here I mentioned that I like to push them up manually, but I do have a watch for Salesforce where whenever I take and change a Salesforce file that I've determined, either a CLS or a page file, you can do any other type of Salesforce file too, but it just takes and pushes that event path or the file name and pushes it into my command. So I can take and push just that one file up, which is kind of different than the way that the other tools work and how they take and bundle up your entire project and push it up, like what Ant does. So that's kind of really the magical way that not magical way, but simple way in which we can take and execute tasks and run commands from inside of our editor. So now that I've kind of sold you on what the present is, what is the future for Visual Studio Code? It's still in beta right now, so maybe you might not want to worry about it because it's not completely there yet. But I like it. I like to use it. And the great thing about it is that they have a user voice site. So Visual Studio Code is kind of a new, unique thing for Microsoft. It kind of displays the new way Microsoft is working, and that Microsoft is trying to create tools for developers on every platform. They're trying to empower developers on every platform, and it's awesome stuff. The user voice site is basically a crowdsourced thing where you can go on the site, you can take in, put in a feature that you want, and you can vote on those features, and you can have other people vote on those features. The top voted features right now are plugin support and code folding, and those are going in very, very soon. Kind of the reason why you might use Atom over Visual Studio Code is that it doesn't have a great, thriving plugin architecture right now. The great thing to look forward to with Visual Studio Code is that since it is built on the same platform as Git or the Atom shell, that plugin architecture probably will be very similar. they use the same, just like I was showing before, the reason I was able to use snippets and syntaxes is because they were already there for Atom. All I had to do was take and convert that over, put it into a JSON file, and put that up there in my settings file, and bam, I get actual code highlighting and snippets for my Salesforce files. So it's really awesome that it kind of displays how Microsoft now is kind of embracing open source. Where Microsoft is using the foundation that somebody else has built, the foundation that lots of people have built over the history, and they're standing on the shoulders of giants, as they say, and they're trying to contribute something new to this ecosystem. And they're trying to, the great things that I really love about what they're contributing is that the TypeScript compiler with the OmniShop Roslyn gives us real awesome Intellisense for files that we wouldn't otherwise have. I'm looking forward to once the plugin architecture comes out and is more fleshed out. I'm looking forward to creating actual Intellisense for Salesforce files. I mean, I know you get that, you get rudimentary stuff like that in other editors, but it would be awesome to have real Intellisense for JavaScript, TypeScript, CoffeeScript, Salesforce files, all in one editor. The editor is simple, only a few tools. It's very streamlined, very minimalistic. So if you want to know more about the technologies and some of the projects that I use inside of my workflow, the project that I built kind of to enable that workflow that has the gulp file, has an example gulp file, has the syntaxes and snippets in it, is my Salesforce VS Code repo. I mentioned the Webpack / Angular Webpack stuff that we built, that we use. I'm looking forward to integrating hot towel Angular TypeScript into my next application, and we include JSR mocks so we can take and allow for offline development. So that kind of goes, from end to end, the whole process of what tools you need to get, why you should care about Salesforce, why Visual Studio Code is a great editor because it's great with JavaScript and TypeScript, has that Intellisense built into it. And you can start using the editor for your JavaScript development today. It's pretty fantastic. So thank you for coming. I'll look forward to answering any questions that you have. And we're hiring. So thank you. Yep.
One of the first times I've actually seen a Salesforce presentation where Microsoft is so prevalent. Has this anything to do with the offer from Microsoft 2 months ago to buy Salesforce?
I am completely disconnected from that. Really what it stems from is my director wanted me to do a Dreamforce presentation. And that week I saw they put out Visual Studio Code, and I was like, hey, I'll do something with Visual Studio Code. And they took the talk, so I had to make something. So yeah, I mean, it speaks to the new synergistic ways in which the two companies are working together, and that the new Microsoft is more open. They're enabling more developers on different platforms to use the tools that we actually want to use instead of keeping us tied into their little ecosystem. And then the other great thing is that it's free. It's open source. It's built with open source technologies. I mean, there aren't that many editors where you can edit the editor with the editor. I mean, you can open up, do command open, you can open up the Visual Studio Code file, and bam, you can go into the actual code that's running as you're running it, modify it, and you can customize the editor as you want. If you're a JavaScript developer, then you already know how to develop, this new editor. I mean, you can modify it however you want to. So, doesn't tie in specifically, but it's a great synergy. Yeah. Yes? Yeah, so the great thing that enables that is like I was talking about, the OmniShop Roslyn and TypeScript compiler underneath, is that because of the way TypeScript works, is that you can create type definition files for plain old JavaScript files in addition to TypeScript files. And there's an entire ecosystem out there. There's a website called Definitely Typed, and you can go out to this Definitely Typed website, and there are definitely typed descriptions for lots of different libraries, like Bootstrap, UI Bootstrap. There's a type definition file. So if you're using kind of tools in the mainstream, you can go out there and get your type definition file, and you don't have to worry about writing TypeScript. You don't have to worry about any, just write JavaScript. And because it has that type definition file underneath, it'll take and recognize when you're using a global that it doesn't know about, and it'll take and look for that typing in its typings folder. And so you just take and PSD install Angular and go into your editor and start editing away. In fact, you don't even need to do the TSD thing. If you type in Angular inside of a JavaScript file, it'll notice that it doesn't know what Angular is, and it'll go look for that typings. If it's not in the typings, it'll give you a little squiggly line, a little light bulb. And it'll give you a little action, quick action to do on it. And in that quick action, you can go download the type definition file. So you don't even have to worry about what a type definition file is or what the command line tool to do it actually is. It's there in the editor. You just type in Angular, hit the light bulb, bam, you get Intellisense. Yes?
Do you think there's going to be anything official, like a Salesforce plugin for Microsoft Code?
I'm hoping to make one. So
like you want to do what Maven did for Sublime Text?
So I like Maven's Make, kind of. There are a lot of things I don't like about it. And kind of the philosophy that I've garnered from what I've read from Salesforce is that they don't plan on doing anything like that themselves. They have their tooling API, and they say the tooling API empowers you to build whatever plugin you want to for whatever architecture you want. So that tooling API is kind of the go-between between what tools you want to make and what tools Salesforce has. So I don't really foresee them making an official Visual Studio Code Salesforce plugin, but you can use mine. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've got one.
Yes.
So you said that you like the Git integration.
Yeah.
Than what they've done in Atom.
Yeah.
So can you?
Do you want me to show you?
Can you say a bit more about that? Or show us?
I can show you. It's a little bit small. So let's open up a JavaScript file. Let's open up something that I've edited. Here's something that I've edited. So here's what I'm talking about. So on the left is the file that we saved before. On the right is the changes that I made. So you can see this morning before I came in here, I took and rearranged my code a little bit better so you could see some stuff. And we can go in here to the Git. We can see that these are the files that I've changed. You can go take and change whatever files you want to. You can take and revert your commit, clean the changes that you've had on there. You can take and stage the files. So if you only want to commit a few files, you can take and type in a commit message. Hello, I changed my gulp file. Command enter, commits it, and push. And there it is. So from inside the editor with a couple different commands, I now have my file taken saved up to Git. So it's pretty awesome, pretty simple how the whole thing works. There's you can see along the right hand side here, there's only 4 buttons. There's your file explorer, your search, Git, and your node debugger. So those are really the only 4 tools that Visual Studio Code has, and that's really all you need. So that's why I like it, is because there's not a whole bunch of stuff. It's very simple, very fast, has what I need, has a task runner, push. It's pretty awesome. So that's, why I like it. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. It's been a great audience.